Hello and welcome back to Coast FC, the Canadian soccer podcast focused on all things CPL, Canadian Championship, and more. My name is Felipe and
And I'm Mike Rice.
And today we are continuing our 2025 CPL preview series. It is the third episode in the series, and we are talking about PACIFC FC and Valour FC. Today, two teams that have gone under a lot of change in this offseason, so there will be plenty for us to talk about. And just as a reminder, if anyone need a reminder, the season is so close, less than 3 weeks away at this point, which means that we're getting closer and closer to the beginning of what is hoping to be one of the most exciting seasons in the CPL. So if you haven't, tuned in and bought into the CPL, now is the time, because if last season was any indication of where the CPL is going, it's going to be a great season. But before we dive into all that was going on for both of these clubs, remember to follow us on all of our socials at Coast to Coast FC, as well as finding us on YouTube under the same name. So let's start with PACIFC. Mike, let's start as usual. We're going to go with our transfers out, since that's one of the biggest stories for PACIFC this season is the players that have left the club. And, these are two of the teams that I think you identify the most with. So this is kind of like a Mike special. Episode here.
I definitely follow the most.
With PACIFC and Valour. So I'll let you do most of the talking today. But looking at some of the players that have gone out, I mean, we'll save, the Gazdov one for last, but a lot of turnover from PACIFC. And I'm talking like a lot of players. You have Paul Amadube leaving, Kevin Cesari, Kunle Dadaluc, Zakaria Baous, Cedric Toussaint, Chico Veanu, Ayman Salouf, Rion Moore. Like a lot of players that came in last season, didn't really work out, immediately shipped back out, which is, I guess, sort of common in leagues like this.
Yeah.
But at the same time, this level of turnover from PACIFC, when we didn't really see that between 2023 and 2024, kind of shows that, James Merriman is wanting to really turn the page and try something really new. I feel like, especially when, some of these players were decent players. I mean, Cedric Toussaint, he went to Japan now, but for PACIFC, he was a player that destroyer in the midfield. Kunle Dadaluc, now at Vancouver FC, he was that dynamic, gunning down the wing, attacking fullback. Ayman Salouf moved to Bulgaria, but at the beginning seemed like this exciting young Dutch player. So what have you made of these sort of transfers? Not including Gazdov, because we'll talk about Gazdov, but like the others, in terms of what that sort of indicates for PACIFC this season.
Yeah, it was a lot of change from what they've been trying to do. Like Paul Amadouve was a young player that I think they were quite keen on, but just really hasn't stepped up as much as I think they would have hoped he would have done after coming back from his time. So he had a bit of time. I remember MLS Next Pro down in Dallas. I remember a couple of years ago. Jerry, again, not came in late, didn't quite like with all the injuries. It just never seemed like the perfect fit. It just seemed like a stopgap with him. I think the others that you mentioned there, Dadaluc, Baous, and Toussaint, like these are strong players. They've been strong players for a while. Maybe Dadaluc had a slightly down season last year. From an attacking standpoint, I think he still worked hard defensively, but he was a very different player last year than he was 2 years ago. I think from how things transpired last year, whether that's him, the club, what was going on, all the changes that have been made, obviously with Didic leaving and Dom getting injured, things had to change a lot. They didn't have quite the attacking flair than I think they would have hoped for. So it's strange to see the three of those leave, and Baous wasn't starting quite as much. But Toussaint 2 years ago, like Dadaluc, they were two of the best players in their position, in the league. It's a big change. I can imagine. Obviously, going off to Japan's quite an exciting option for him. Maybe he was quite keen. Dadaluc we'll go into the transfers in, which may have been something that was planned on both on three sides. How that's come about, and Togoviano and Saluf, like you say, obviously it's the attack that's been the difficult part for them. There's two creative players that, like you say, Saluf started fantastically, but just fell off a cliff. Struggled in Vancouver. He was never going to stay. Like he needs a new setting to kickstart his career again. It just really didn't work. Like it stopped working for him. Tikovianu again just couldn't really provide much, and Real More, it was the case of another year of we can't find a real striker. No, we cannot find anyone that fits, and that's how it just seems something that Pacific have really got to break.
Yeah, and we'll talk about if they managed to do that with the players that they've brought in. But now talking about the big moves out, the ones that maybe weren't in their control. And the biggest one being obviously Emil Gazdov going to CF Montreal. Fantastic move for the reigning Golden Glove winner in the CPL. We obviously talked about TMG going to Halifax last season or last episode as well, and the hole that he kind of now leaves in the defense. It's similar to when Didic left the year prior. And of course, we're talking about strikers that don't work out. The one striker that did sort of work out for them halfway through or late last season, Moses Dyer. His loan expired. Obviously, he didn't stay in Vancouver, and now he's actually at Galway United in Ireland. But three big players that I don't know exactly what happened behind the scenes to facilitate their exits. But I mean, you got to feel like for Pacific, those are three players that they had to work hard to try to find to replace.
Yeah. Obviously, we'll go into who's come in recently, but big for. I mean, Moses Dyer is really interesting to see how he gets on. Like, we'll keep a little tab, see if that move goes down well for him. But Gazdov's incredible. Like in those 2 seasons, the leap he's made in like not just the quality but in his sort of shot stopping, his just command of the box, his maturity has been just incredible to watch, and such an exciting move for them. I know clubs in this league, they know they want to develop these young players and give them a platform to go on, and Gazdov's straight away, like at such a young age, been such a big sort of like shining light for all these young players coming into the league.
Yeah. So I feel like for Gazdov, especially the other two, obviously we already talked about TMG and Moses Dyer. We'll see what he does in Ireland, but Gazdov specifically is one that I feel like everyone feels good about it. Even though I'm sure Pacific would love to have kept them on, everyone feels good because it's a young, goalkeeper, that Canadian German that is going on and reaching that next level. And that was the whole point of bringing in young players in the CPL, is to develop them to take that sort of step. So I feel like for that one, it feels pretty good for everyone. But yeah, looking at so many of the exits and stuff, it really felt initially like Pacific were making a statement saying, it hasn't been good enough the last few seasons. We want to get back to 2021. We need a clean slate in a sense. So let's go out and replace a lot of these players. And for me, I mean, you look at the players, some of the players that have stayed back, you look at the midfield, the only player that you'll really recognize is like Sean Young is the only one that stays from the team like a couple of seasons ago. Josh Hurd as well is pretty much the only one that has stuck around for a while. So Pacific are going through these changes. And we'll see if this coming season, 2025, will be successful because they have brought in, as I mentioned, a lot of players to replace these outgoings. So let's go into them. Let's first talk about some of the names that we are familiar with, some players that I think CPL fans will know or at least know of. Starting, because we're talking about Emil Gazdov, with the replacement for Emil Gazdov, and that is with the loan of Max Anchor. the 20-year-old goalkeeper that has been playing for Vancouver Whitecaps' second side in MLS Next Pro, WFC2, as well as he's made appearances for the first team. He signed a first team contract and a short-term first team contract in 2022. Was named as part of the squad for this current season, but I guess they felt like he wasn't going to get enough game time. They wanted him to go out and get some minutes beyond MLS Next Pro because he, for a while, has been like the number one in MLS Next Pro for them. Had a bit of an injury last season, broke his finger, so he was out for a little while. But for a player that I know quite well because he was part of the Whitecaps, he's a very, very good young Canadian shop stopper, very vocal. He's commanding. He doesn't make too many mistakes, which is great for him and his confidence. I truly think like he's a perfect replacement for Gazdov, but I'm curious to see if he has a similar issue that Gazdov did at the beginning, where it was this young keeper kind of thrown into like the first team after a couple of mistakes. I wonder if it'll start to affect him in the way that Gazdov did, and if he'll be able to bounce back from it in the way that Gazdov did as well. Or it might just be that it goes smoothly through. But do you think there's a lot of pressure on Anchor coming in, especially given that he's another young Canadian keeper who is coming in the wake of the reigning Golden Glove winner?
Yeah, I think obviously like there's going to be bumps along the road for all especially for goalkeepers. It's it's a very isolated position when something goes wrong. I think what's good for a young player coming into this squad, especially, is that you've got Sean Melvin there, who's going to be able to cover when if Max Anchor goes in at number one, you've got a capable backup who's a decent player, and it's someone who can come in for a few games and take the heat off you and help you get ready. He's not someone who you come across as thinking, well, he's going to get so angry if he's not playing every week. Like, I think you can get a good rotation with a player like him. So that helps bed Anchor in and get him familiar with the team, get him building up those connections with the defense and things like that.
Yeah. Yeah, it will obviously take some time, but I'm very excited to see what comes of him in 2025. And he's going to be, paired with some players that have also been in the Whitecap system. And talking about, oh, we need a fresh new page. We need a new look on a new lease on life. They also Pacific decided, well, why don't we look back at our recipe for success in 2021 and maybe bring some of that back in 2025? And that's exactly what they did with Caden Chung and Marco Bustos. Let's first start with Caden Chung, 26-year-old right back. He's back after featuring for 2 seasons for BC rivals Vancouver FC. He returns from the dark side to Pacific. Had an up and down time with Vancouver, like many players do so far with Vancouver.
Horrible injury though, wasn't it?
Yeah, had a really nasty injury in just his 5th game for the club. Was out for a while and then came back and had to be sort of shoehorned into midfield. Finally started to play more right back last season, but still had some niggling issues here and there. So hasn't been able to be 100% fit for an entire season for them, which is sad because he came in as like one of the most talented players that Vancouver FC had in their roster and never really got to show that. But now he comes back to Pacific FC with that expectation of, okay, we need to see you be able to do what you did back in 2021 now, and with more experience, with more, leadership, because now he's not the same, how old is he? He was like 22 in 2021, 21, 22. Now at 26, you have a little bit more maturity. You need to bring that in, and you're replacing Kunle Dadaluk, who went the other way. Different profile than Kunle Dadaluk, but still a very, very good addition. How do you see him fitting in to this Pacific side?
Yeah, I think obviously he's got a good relationship with James Merriman, you'd imagine. Coming back in there, it's one where they acted quick, and I think they're confident in his fitness now. And they've had that chance to see him in the end towards the end of last season. They must be very confident, and they're looking at a way of changing how they use that fullback's position, like you say, Kunle Luke and him are such different profiles. We'll see someone who's a little better on the ball. Luke was very direct and quick, but his ball playing skills aren't what Caden Chung's are. Sorry, I mean, he was getting played in the centre of midfield at Vancouver, like you said early on, because of his ability on the ball. So we'll see how Pacific, I'm assuming, will be wanting to go back to that possession dominant sort of style, and I think he's going to be a key part of playing out from the back with Ali and Dom and players like that.
Yeah, biggest thing for him will obviously be to stay fit.
Yeah.
He needs to stay fit to get that momentum, to get that kind of routine going. I feel like the stop-start nature of his last 2 seasons really affected him, both in confidence and in playing ability. But the talent is there, and I feel like if he can stay fit, he'll be a great, great addition for them. And you're right, kind of goes back to that possession-heavy side of things rather than maybe that counterattack that they had to resort to. And that's where we saw like Kunle Dadaluk be more effective. So I think that's a good move forward for Pacific with Caden Chung, even though they had to technically go back for it. And they had to go back for the attack as well. Another place that they had a bunch of issues with in the last few seasons. They have now brought back Marco Bustos, who is a beloved player for Pacific, was part of that side in 2021 that dominated the league and beat Forge, the only team to have beaten Forge up until last season in the playoffs. And he spent the last 2 seasons in Sweden with IFK Värnamo. He is a CPL, established player. He played 4 seasons in the CPL since the beginning. He started out in Valour before moving to Pacific for 3 seasons. And in 90 total appearances for both clubs, he's contributed 23 goals and 20 assists, 43 goal contributions. That's nearly 1 every 2 games, which is an insane rate for a player at this level. I mean, no wonder he left to Europe, but now he comes back, and it's a similar thing with Caden, which he has the talent. Biggest thing that kind of plagued him in 2021 and I think since is being injuries. He wasn't there when Pacific beat the Whitecaps in 2021. He wasn't there when Pacific beat Forge in the final because he was dealing with injuries. So he's missed some big moments. I think consistency is going to be the biggest thing, but I think in terms of talent, like he's an amazing player to have back in the league, and hopefully he's become an even better player given all that he's learned playing in Sweden. So I think this is really, really exciting signing, obviously because of the nostalgia, but also because he might be maybe not the answer necessarily, but a big component of the answer to their goal scoring problems.
Definitely, and like we've said frequently about Pacific, unfortunately, their attacking players haven't been consistent at all. Like there's flashes, and you get excited about it, and then it goes. He's a player, like you say, like he's got a history of being a consistent player when fit, and I mean, he's still only 28, so this is like peak years for him to, really go out and be a huge part of the league again. So it'd be really exciting to see. Obviously, decent amount of depth in that squad. I think they'll be quite careful, knowing previous injury histories. Like they've got those players in there that can give him a few minutes off and start when needs be. They can manage his load quite well, but I think if he's fit, he'll be on the pitch.
And I feel like hopefully if he has a good start, he'll kick on and really be another star in the league as he was before he left. But now let's talk about a couple of players that have, again, made the switch from within the league to come to Pacific. 2 midfielders specifically in Matteo Schiavoni and in Aiden Daniels. We talked a little bit about Daniels in the last episode with Halifax, but he comes in to the Pacific side, spent 3 seasons with Halifax. He looked good, and there were periods of times where he looked like the real deal, but I felt like he never really reached his peak. He never found that form, like that hot streak, for him to really showcase who he really is. It was only ever flashes or little tiny little purple patches, and I think what was really missing was that final product, because he's an attacking midfielder. He loves to go and attack, but in 3 seasons he only registered 5 goals and 6 assists, which I think really tells a story that he wasn't able to really translate that ability that had on the pitch into results. Now he comes into the Pacific FC side looking to change that.
Yeah, and I think if we look at how they've wanted to like how they've wanted to get set up, it's very different to how Halifax's sort of attacking midfielders work. He's often tried to play in almost a similar style to like a Ferrin, like behind the striker, where there's lots of movement, sprinting, but in certain channels. I think coming to Pacific, what might benefit him, and we'll have to see, but he'll probably get in that sort of number 10 role and be asked to like float, pick up space, like and bring players into the game or attack. It's not so much in a specific role and in a specific movements and passing patterns in movements that Halifax have, which are just didn't seem to fully suit him. Like especially last season, he kept dropping out of the starting lineup quite regularly. I think here you've got players on the wings that will go by. They'll get forward. They'll support striker. You've got hard-working midfielders behind him, and this could be. I think this is why Aidan Daniels would have chosen Pacific out of all the teams he could go for. We want to keep the ball. We want to play with a number 10. I think that's how they'll probably look at. He may have to. We'll see whether he has to play deeper at times if we play a 6 and 2/8 at time. But I just don't think he's going to be in that weird winger / number 10 area that him and Ferrin and all the other players had to pick up behind the likes of a Coimbra.
Yeah, and I think for him it'll be hopefully a fresher slate, and he'll have a little bit more of that freedom, and his play style might align more with the philosophy that we've seen from James Merriman, as you mentioned. So hopefully it works out for him. I really like him as a player. I love watching him when he's on his day on the ball. He's a fantastic player, but it's just on his day, he needs to be a bit more consistent and really needs to work on that final product, because I feel like once he gets that going, then I think he'll, turn into a really good player. But at 26 years old, you're not old at that point, but you're not young anymore either.
You're expecting a little bit more end product by that point, are you? It's
exactly.
no longer this young player that has potential. You're starting to hit your peak years.
Exactly. So I feel like 2025, maybe 2026, those are the make or break years for Aidan Daniels to see if he can really kick on and be the player that he's shown that he could be with the potential that he's shown before. But for him, he's got to really state a case. For Schiavone, he's only 19. He still has a lot of time ahead of him, and he has shown some good glimpses as well when he was playing for Forge FC. Scored that game winner against Vancouver FC. I was there for that one, and that's how I'm like, okay, I gotta remember, Matteo Schiavone for that. But yeah, it looked like a good versatile midfielder that can attack, is hardworking. Obviously at Forge, because of the standards that they have, the style of play they have, that he's going to be a player that has worked hard and hopefully will continue to work hard and be focused and be disciplined. I feel like, as a player that came from CF Montreal Academy, went to Bologna's team because obviously of the ownership, like Bologna's youth academy and everything. He's got, a little bit about him that kind of is exciting. And I'm hoping to see maybe a little bit more of him this season for Pacific, especially since the midfield is probably the lightest in terms of depth that they have. It would be nice to see him hopefully feature more alongside, Kashavaras. I think both of them hopefully see more feature, especially with under 21 obligations.
That's it. Yeah, you've got 2 young players here. Like, we'll see which one takes a bigger step maybe this year. But you've got some young players really fighting for places. Obviously, Sean Young's still there and is a big part of the team. And we'll talk about a couple of other players coming up that have been brought in. But these two are the young ones that are really trying to fight for those extra minutes in the rotation. It'll be quite exciting to see where they fit in and how confident they look in making steps year on year in their development.
Yeah, yeah, and with the under 21 minutes that Pacific will need, no doubt we will see them feature more and more, especially now that they don't have the cheat code that was Emil Gazdov.
Exactly.
Though if Anchored is the number one, then I guess they will have that cheat code
Yeah.
once again, just with Anchor. But they also have brought in some experience throughout the side. Starting in defense, we're going to go over some of the players that probably people don't really know all that much
No,
about.
we
So
don't know huge amounts.
we're not gonna pretend that we know everything about all of these players, but maybe more about their profiles and what they can bring to the team. Starting with Pedro Macado from Portugal. He's 28, 6'3" center back. He last played for Finnish Premier Division club IFK Mariehamn, where he appeared for 24 times. And he is a player that started out in Portuguese lower leagues and even spent some time in Romania as well. They describe him as an intelligent, hardworking, physical center back. I mean, if you look at Pacific's scouting team, they might not really hit the mark when it gets to goal scorers. But when it comes to defenders, they're
Yeah.
quite good at bringing in quality defenders. 28 years old is another player that comes in with plenty of experience, hopefully with a lot of leadership. I think that, knowing very little to none about this player could be a nice little pickup for them.
Yeah, I think they've gone out. They've you've got to try and partner Ali and Dom well with like a big, strong, solid defensive player, because Ali and Dom's going to move if he before he got injured, he was all over the place. That was one roaming centre back. That was total football. So you imagine coming from get a bit of experience in the European leagues, coming out here, big player. You imagine that sort of getting that aerial threat, getting that defensive solidity. So we'll see how he looks once he gets going.
Yeah. Hopefully he's a player that can continue that trend of solid center backs for Pacific FC. Because if they start to leak goals as well as not score goals, then it's going to go really bad for Pacific this season. But he's also joined by two midfielders that they've brought in. One being Lucas Browning Lagerfeld, a 26-year-old midfielder, Irish-born but Swedish-raised. Interesting combo there. He's played more than 100 matches in Sweden. He last played for Gefle IF, made 25 appearances and 2 goals in 2024. I'm really going to try with the pronunciation. I apologize if I pronounce anything wrong, but this is like the second time that I'm reading it, so I'm just going to throw in a Hail Mary with him. Interestingly, though, because of his Irish heritage, he did play one season for Sligo Rovers in Ireland, which is always for me like one of the coolest names. And I don't know, in like the British Isles, Sligo Rovers. I love it. And he made 27 appearances and 1 goal. He's described as a versatile midfield general. So interesting to see how he is going to play out, and he is going to be anchored beside somebody maybe like Sean Young beside him, but like he's going to be anchored by a new player as well in Daniel De Pauli, 25-year-old Brazilian defensive midfielder. He last played for FC Krumovgrad in the top tier of Belgian football, where he made 14 appearances. But prior to that, he spent 5 years in Brazil, and apparently he's a defensive midfielder, but also can play as a box-to-box. So we might have our midfield 3 right there for Pacific. De Pauli, Holding, and then you have Lagerfeld and Sean Young, or Lagerfeld and Aiden Daniels, if Aiden Daniels is put into the 10 right there. Again, knowing not that much about them, but more in terms of their profiles, could be that both of these players allow Pacific to, now that they have more attacking midfield talent, focus on that while they do the dirty business, behind them, and hopefully can do it well.
Yeah, I mean, from the little bits of research, like Lucas Brown Lagerfeld's a big, athletic central midfielder, kind of sounds like the profile of Sean Young's. That's strength and energy in the midfield. I think they're going to be looking at trying to control that area of the pitch a lot better than they did last year. So it looks like, yeah, they've got that, and yeah, Daniel De Pauli, again, like you mentioned, there, another defensive midfielder. It'll be interesting to see if they do play with three like that, or if they do try and play over 10. Like, how do the other players fit in? Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how they manage all these players, and then getting these young players in alongside them as well for the minute.
Yeah, exactly. It'll be interesting to see how. Yeah, I mean that's good though that they have so much depth and versatility that you can have different lineups and you can have different profiles. That is what is going to help them, hopefully get back to being one of the top teams in the CPL, is by having so many options for James Merriman to choose. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see how they fit all these puzzle pieces together. Now going into the attacking sense, two more signings that they've brought in. One that might be maybe familiar.
Yeah.
I'll forgive you if you don't remember. It's Ronan Krat, 21-year-old winger, Ottawa born. He most recently spent time with SV Werder Bremen 2 in Germany, but you might know him from his time at York United. He joined Werder Bremen's second team on loan in January of 2023 before that move was made permanent in June of 2024 or 2023 in that year. He only made 14 appearances and scored 2 goals for York United in his time there. So not a frequent player, not a staple with the likes of Marco or Caden, but somebody that has been around the scene in the CPL. He has gotten better in his time in Germany. Between 2022 and 2024, he tallied 9 goals and 14 assists, so not bad. He's still, again, only 21, so the fact that he's played that much all before being 21 is quite impressive for him. But I don't know, from what a little I remember of him, he's an attacking player that can bring some danger to him, but because he was so young, right? He was like 2021, 4 years ago, he was 17.
Yeah.
We barely saw much
He'll be a
from him.
different player now with time in Germany. Like the youth setups, obviously, if Werder Bremen is a huge club in the country. Like they've got plenty of history. Like like being a good developer of young talent. So he's going to have learned so much about his game. He's going to have developed into a whole new player. So he's one that's just going to be really interesting to see like what we get. Like we get. Yeah, we'll see. Like we see Bustos, Krat there. It's players to really push Zanata and Herd and maybe take their places this year is what is the new wingers in town over on the island.
And it's great that they have competition, one that has experience like Marco Bustos and one that has still that youthful, I'm not gonna call it arrogance, but like that youthful kind of energy of like wanting to push on, wanting to do better, wanting to, always perform. So it'll be good to kind of have that push, both Zanata and Herd, because both Zanata and Herd didn't have fantastic seasons last season.
No.
So now with both of these wingers coming in, maybe they will get kicked into gear at the best, and at the very worst, well, they have options. Pacific have options to choose from if they don't, if they have similar seasons to last season and they don't kick on. But lastly, I wanted to talk about their striker, their new striker that they've brought in, Emmanuel Montejano, 23-year-old striker from Mexico. He's from Pumas Academy and played for their U17 and U20 sides. And was most recently on loan to second division side, Liga de Expansión, Celaya Football Club, making 16 appearances. Now, on the face of it, coming from Pumas Academy, quite nice. Pumas obviously a very historic club. But looking deeper into it, I don't think he's made, or I don't think he's scored his first professional goal, and he's 23 years old. He did not score. They didn't put it in the press release. I had to go check on Transfer Market, but to confirm. But he did not score in his 16 appearances for Celaya Football Club, and he's a striker. Now,
tough.
yeah, that one's a bit tough because, as we were talking about, unless your name's Moses Dyer, Pacific FC have really struggled to bring in goal-scoring number 9s that can lead the line, get the goals for them, since Alejandro Diaz left. Now, looking at Montejano, it doesn't really feel like they've addressed this yet again after so many seasons. And that, for me, is, I think, my biggest concern going into 2025.
Yeah, it's they're rolling the dice on him, aren't they? And they've looked at his physical profile, they've looked at how we've watched some of his games and his movement, and they're giving him a chance to say, get some starts. Like in that, just looking back over those 16 games, he's just got over 300 minutes, so it's not a huge amount of time. So it's not 16 starts, I guess, is the takeaway from that. It's coming on and getting minutes at the end of games. So we'll see. Like, he's, from reading the reports, like they're not going to say anything else, really, are they? But they seem very excited about how he might fit in from what they've looked at and his abilities as a player. So yeah, this is it's just another roll of the dice and see what comes up.
Yeah, which, I mean, it could work. Yeah. It could come in and it could be like another Alejandro Diaz. You never know, like coming in and hitting the ground running. But I don't know. I don't have trust in Pacific for the issues that they've had with strikers. Like, if I was a fan of theirs, I would want them to bring in not even necessarily a striker that most people know, because it's very hard at this level, but at least a striker that has a good resume, right? A striker that you can see that in whatever they played in Europe, or they played in USL, or they played in some other thing, comes in with a good record of scoring goals, and you can think, okay, this guy knows how to put the ball into the back of the net. No discredit to Montejano, he hasn't done that.
Yeah, but to be fair, Riyad Moore's got 30 caps with Trinidad and 10 goals. Decent enough start. Like, he scored goals before, and he's come in and it did not work. Really. So
True.
I think they must have looked at that. They're just trying to. What I can assume from just purely, like, with no background on it whatsoever, they've identified the style of striker they want, and they've gone out and looked for a player who looks like they play in that style, no matter what history they have, no matter their age. And they've looked at the quality of the opponents he's probably trained, like players he's trained with, opponents he's come up against, things like that, and giving it a go. Because why wouldn't you at this after this run at striker? like returns. Yeah. It's
yeah, no, I guess that's true. I guess maybe they've seen the previous strikers come in with better resumes and it hasn't worked out, so now they're just looking at profiles. Hopefully that is the case, and Montejano does prove me wrong, but until I see it, I'm not going to believe it. I'll be honest. The trust has eroded for me in terms of finding good strikers for Pacific, unless, of course, your name is Moses Dyer. But now that we've seen transfers in and transfer out, what do you think they still need ahead of 2025, if anything? I know for me, I think, while they have two young, good players in midfield, maybe one more midfielder could be good for them, depending on the way that the style that they play. I don't know, like, is Schiavone the backup for Aiden Daniels in the 10? Do they have somebody that can sort of fill that 10 role if Aiden Daniels isn't that player, that might be a position that you could look for. But more than anything, I think for me is that they need an established striker, like Montejano and somebody else. Because if
Yeah, just
Montejano isn't scoring the goal, just bring somebody else that can maybe with a different profile, maybe a little bit more experience, can help at least push each other through competition or cover each other in case anybody is going through a little bit of a bad period. I think that might be what Pacific need more than anything right now.
Yeah, just in depth there. Yeah, I agree. Like getting another striker in, like just because you can't have one. Like, their forward line is is quite slim. You've got 5 players there. 3 will probably start. You could do with another one at the very least. It just makes sense, doesn't it?
Exactly. So hopefully they can bring another striker in to ease my concerns and maybe concerns from other Pacific fans as well if they're in the same boat as I am. But now looking at their higher or lower chart here, they are a team that finished 5th last season on 34 points. They had a 9-7-12 record, 27 goals for in 28 games. Yikes. Worst in the league. They conceded, though, only 32 goals, third best in the league. So, as I said, I have a lot of trust in them in finding good defenders,
Yeah.
not so much in finding goal scoring forwards. Biggest question for you, Mike, higher or lower this season in 2025?
I think higher. I reckon. I think that the bringing in Bustos, getting him back in, excited by Roden Crap. I think they'll try and go back to being like a ball heavy, like possession heavy side, and yeah, if they've replaced, like if it does work well, if Mercado is a good replacement for TMG, you've got Ali and Don back, like, and he plays a full season. I just think they're going to be bigger. They're going to be stronger and quicker a lot around the pitch, and they got a few more extra players where some of those changing where they can keep the ball better. So, they may not score the goals, but I kind of hope they do.
Fair enough. I think for me, I'm stuck between stay the same and maybe a little bit higher. I think I'll give them the benefit of the doubt and go a little bit higher, so probably like 4th, just because they've reinforced a lot. And a lot of the reinforcements I do like, obviously, Caden Chung, Marco Bustos, some of the profiles in the midfielders, and Mikado at center back. I'm really excited for Max Anchor. But the goal scoring for me is still don't feel like it's being addressed unless Marco Busto just absolutely kills it, scores 14, 15 goals this season, blows us away. I still don't know where the goals are necessarily coming from aside from Marco Bustos. Maybe Zanata, if he can continue that late season form, can get a few. But aside from that, I don't really know. And I think that for me is my biggest concern. So I'm thinking just above where they finished last season. Now let's turn gears towards Valour FC, because they are a team that I know, Mike, you'll be very excited to chat about, because another team that's gone through a lot of changes, maybe not as many, I think, as Pacific, but still a decent amount. Starting with the transfer outs first, a couple of names that I was a little bit surprised to see leave. You know, Marcelo Polisi, Juan Pablo Sanchez, Abdul Binate, Kwemi. These are players that we've talked about. Tas Morkudis, I think, was a big one as well. I was quite surprised that he left. Jordy Swibble, another one. But especially for you, since, you know, Valor is your team, did you kind of feel like this was expected given the season that Valor had? Is it something like maybe, you know, as good as these players might have been in terms of, you know, flashes or stuff like that, overall it wasn't good enough, so we needed kind of another change? Or is this just something you'd expect now from Valor, that they're constantly going through like a carousel of new players every season until something sticks?
No, I mean they do change regularly. I'll give you that. Mordegudis has gone back to Australia. Maybe that's kind of it was written in the stars for him. Maybe he wanted to go back. But you look at some of the other players, Polisi didn't get much, like the game time of these. If you look at all the players that have gone, Quemi put in a bit when he came in late in the season. Swibble started to drift away after a great start. But the biggest thing is they understood what they seem to have found their game plan come the second half of the season, and they were a lot better. Obviously, coming back, getting games in Winnipeg again wasn't perfect. It wasn't exactly consistent, but you could see there was a game plan, and there were certain players that fitted what Phil DeSantis wanted, and like a lot of these players that have gone just didn't really make big impacts on the team, get the minutes that they would have wanted, and just I just don't think they fit what Valour want to be this year.
Yeah, and I think the end of last season did show that this Valour team has promise, and maybe now that they finally found that kind of recipe, I'm not gonna say recipe for success, but maybe that foundation for potential.
Yeah, there's the faintest markings of a philosophy.
Yeah, exactly. Like there's not even like a spark. There's like a little bit of like smoke before the spark catches, kind of thing.
I'm not going to get too carried away, and it's all
exactly. But it seems like now Valour are like, okay, we have a faint idea of how we could actually be good in this league. How do we make that into a reality? And so they've brought in a lot of players to hopefully make them more competitive for 2025. Once again, let's talk about some players that we are familiar with from Valour. Starting with goalkeeper once more. Elias Himaras, the backup goalkeeper from York United. Only 22 years old, 3 seasons with York United, has made quite a few appearances for them. Can he sort of push Viscosi this season? I know Viscosi, very eclectic keeper, can have a couple of interesting moments. Does that sort of open up the gap for you for Himaras to maybe take the reins?
Yeah, I think he's looked at where's there a chance I can get. Where's there a chance a goalkeeper might lose their own position? Some starts. He's looked good, like you say, when he's had moments. He's just not been fancied at York enough. Like and then they've brought in other players at times, and you don't know. He might be forever like only good enough to be a backup, but he's got to go. He's got to give it a try. And I think someone like Viscosi, if he does start dropping clangers or plays every so often, he could end up. The options weren't that great last year, so we'll see. Yeah, we'll see if he can get a chance and see prove whether he could be a CPL starting goalie in the future.
Yeah, I think from what I've seen of him, he has it in him. It just really he needs to make good on whatever opportunity he has. And like you mentioned, I think, now that Jan Fillion isn't around, I think Viscosi's the next best thing as a keeper that might have to might write himself off and give space for another keeper to kind of take the spot. But he's going to have familiar faces in front of him in terms of players that play in the CPL. Zachary Fernandez and Rocco Romeo. We did talk about Fernandez a little bit again in the Halifax episode last week. 23 years old, very dynamic wingback for Halifax the last few seasons. He's made a whopping 78 appearances for them, contributing 5 goals and 8 assists, coming in to provide some competition for Roberto Alarcón. For you, does Zachary Fernandez take Alarcón's spot?
I think he probably will. I liked Alarcón. I thought he was really good. A lot for Valour last year. He showed himself to be strong defensively when they needed it as well. But I don't think you push the boat out and get Fernandez if you're not going to start him. At least the bringing him in does mean that, if you do have one game when Antonoglu's not available, he could probably get shuffled across to the left as a backup if ever needs be, and you can get Alacon to come back in at right back, and there's a couple of options there at least, I guess.
Yeah, it's true. They have options, they have ways of
Mm.
dealing with it. But I think that this is a really good
Yeah,
signing. I think Zachary Fernandez is a little bit more dynamic, a little bit
yeah,
more attack-minded than Alarcon, and I think it'd be a really good foil for Temi Antonoglu
mm.
on the left. So I think in terms of wingbacks or fullbacks, I think Valour have a really good
Yeah.
pair there. And in the middle, they have the return of Rocco Romeo, 24 years old. He comes back to Valour after a bit of a mistake-prone time with Vancouver FC. He came in their first season, 2023, with maybe too much pressure on him too fast. He was only like 21, 22, and was sort of expected to be the young leader in the back. And as much as he has grown a lot in his time at Vancouver FC, that's still a lot to ask of a player.
Mm.
And I feel like that hindered his development a lot. And now moves to Valor wanting to maybe be surrounded by more experience that he can learn from, and he can be more of that focus, at least compared to Vancouver FC, right? That's
Mm.
why he said for himself, he said he doesn't want to be a part of a youth movement, and that's why he came to Valor. Do you think that is a smart move for Rocco to sort of jump ship from one V to the other V?
I mean, in theory, it's coming up like the centre back they've kept on from last year, Facineri, is not exactly full of experience.
Mm,
And obviously we'll talk about Egwu later. It's still a very thin centre back depth chart there, and I mean, he hasn't got a seasoned central defender next to him, so he's going to still have to do that. Yeah, he may have more experienced players in the league around him. I mean, but Antonoglu's not exactly experienced, but he's a very good player. Like, so there's not that worry, I guess. Like, if you've got Alarcon, Zachary Fernandez, they have got the thing. They have got experience, but in front of him, he had players with experience as well. Like Renan Garcia's probably got as much experience as anyone when he was at Vancouver. So it's a funny one in some ways because there were a lot of quite experienced players in Vancouver playing quite regularly. I kept finding,
mm.
the squad was made up of a lot of young players, but he had Irving behind him. He had Renan Garcia in front of him. There were players there. It's just that partner that wasn't experienced for a long time, and he still doesn't have that here.
True. Maybe it has to do more with perspective because I feel like
Possibly.
Vancouver is very youth focused and wanting, they talked about wanting to be the football factory. You see the sales that they made this offseason.
Mm.
We'll get into them more in their episode of James Cameron and Graham McDonald. They've brought in a lot of young players as well. So maybe for Rocco, it's not even necessarily like experience just beside him, but like maybe just the overall perspective being more on like winning and making a good solid team and wanting to progress in that regard rather
Yeah.
than just finding good young local talent, developing them and selling them on. Maybe it's just a change of philosophy that
Yeah.
really might have sold him to come back to
Mm.
Valor. We'll never really know. Maybe he'll open up more about it later on in the season, but comes in and I think for the CPL level is a good player. Hopefully, he
Yeah.
has less mistakes about him
Mm.
and can be a bit more solid for his team. But I mean, as somebody that's got to see him up close various times, I like Rocco, and
Mm.
I hope he does well. Lastly, for the names that we do know, for Valor signings, Chris Twardek,
Mm.
27 years old, comes in from Atletico Ottawa, and he's listed as a forward. in the CPL transfer tracker, which I think kind of already just that shows why he made that move.
Yeah.
Because if you look at the depth already that Valour have a right back with Zachary Fernandez and with Alarcon, Twardek isn't coming here to play second or third fiddle. He's coming here to be one of the starting players, and I don't think he'll get that at right back. I think they've brought him in to be a right winger and play in that forward position, something that he wasn't really allowed to do with Atletico last season. Hence why I think he's come and made this move.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, he gets to move up the pitch a little bit more, but Valour also get a player who's defensively very sound in his position, but he can finally sort of go forward more and like get and show the qualities he's got as a winger. So it gives them that on out of possession and in possession. It's just it's great for Valour in the way they play if they continue with this 4-4-2, making it like they want to hurry, they want to bully the other team as much as they can. They want to force them into mistakes and then counterattack. And you get the impression the way Twilight plays, like he can do all that. Like, and it's an improvement. Defensively, it's an improvement on Jordan Faria, like in that right midfield role. Like Jordan Faria did a lot of good stuff going forward, and he did work hard. But just think, Chris Twardek is like a better all-round player.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the best part about him is that he's good anywhere down that right side. And if you have him and Zachary Fernandez, that's a lot of attacking input on that right-hand side. But the good thing is that they have enough energy and, have enough stamina between them to just swap. And you'll never know if it's Zachary Fernandez attacking on the right or Chris Twardek attacking on the right. And I feel like that kind of unpredictability for Valour, if they get it right, will be really, really useful for them going into 2025. Now, looking at some of the players that we don't really know all that much about, there is, similar to Pacific, one player that has a small experience in the CPL. So if you do recognize this name, I commend you for being a true CPL diehard fan, and that's Kelsey Egwu, the 21-year-old center back. He's 6'4" at 21 years old. He's a big boy. On loan from JK Narva Trans in Estonia. He is Toronto-born, Nigeria raised, but did play in Edmonton for a lot of his youth soccer. And he has played in the CPL before, but has only made one appearance in a developmental contract with FC Edmonton. Rest in peace, the Eddies. So he's featured once for the CPL.
So
that was a while ago. Because the FC Edmonton was still around. So evidently, a while ago. And as a very, very young kid. Now, for JK Narva Trans in Estonia, he has more experience. He played 37 times for them in 2024. A nice, good amount of games for him. And at such a young age, comes in and might be pushing Rocco and Facineri for those starting center back roles.
I mean, he's one of three, so he's going to be.
You'd hope so.
Yeah, I'm not going to pretend to say I remember him making that one appearance, and I'm not going to pretend to say I know anything about Estonian football in Europe. All I can tell you is it's not the highest of standards, but I think we could have all gathered that quite quickly. But they're teams that have been playing for a long time. Like the league's been running for a while. I'm not sure on Narva Trans. Maybe a quick check, but maybe they may have played some of the lower level European games, like the qualifying rounds and things like that. So teams in like European leagues, they've been going on for so long. At least they're getting some form of quality of coaching. So to come back to that, to have those experiences is always great for a young player when they get away. I mean, we spoke like the likes of like Easton Ongaro before, where he went off to Romania and other things. Like it was always great for a young player to get that new like style of coaching and things like that. So it'd be interesting to see what see what he can bring. Like really, because some very interesting background in football, isn't it? Already for a young man.
Exactly. He's been to some interesting places, so
Mm.
we'll see how that helps him, especially at such a young age, settle into technically a new league. Let's be honest, it's basically a new league for him
Mm.
because again, he only made one appearance,
Yeah.
so essentially a new league. So yeah, excited to see what he brings. Now let's talk about some Portuguese connections because Valour, after Resurrecção success, decided
Yeah.
that hey, let's bring in a couple more Portuguese midfielders to play alongside him. It might be an all Portuguese midfield for Valour in 2025 because they've brought in Bruno Figueiredo and Javier Venancio, both 25, both midfielders, both from Portugal. Starting with Figueiredo, he is from the Benfica Academy. And he has made 46 appearances, scored 5 goals, and added 2 assists in the third Portuguese division and in Taca de Portugal, which is like the cup, since turning pro. He is slated as a sort of like a box to box dynamic midfielder, while Xavier Veneciao has had experience leaving Portugal and going to Italy, where he last played for ASD Chieri Calcio in Serie D. He made 17 appearances and contributed a goal and 3 assists there. He's supposed to be the more attacking one. Again, very little known about them
Mm.
too. But if Rezer Shao is anything to go off of as a player that was pretty impressive for Valor last season, this could be 2 more Portuguese players that because they're all from Portugal, they're used to that kind of philosophy over there. They might have that chemistry, and because they're similar in age,
Mm.
they might be really good as a kind of a midfield unit together.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see how they get on because let's say, with the players that Valor have moved on. I mean, Dante Campbell's there, but he's a Swiss Army knife more than a
Yeah,
strict centre midfielder. You've got Mla, who looked impressive coming in partway through the season, and obviously Ohim back is fantastic for them, and he'll be a strong leader. But they needed new bodies, and so it'll be really interesting to see. These guys will obviously get time because we don't know if the roster's finished for Valor, but the way that they'll need to rotate and deal with travel and things like that, and how players' form gets on, injuries, suspensions. These players are going to get their games, so we're going to get a glimpse of them pretty soon. You'd imagine from the start of the season.
yeah, yeah, and hopefully, I love Portuguese football. I love watching
Yeah.
the Liga Portugal. Hopefully they can bring a little bit of that Portuguese flair in because I think they can be very, very good.
Mm.
But now moving on to the attack, Valor have brought in some young, youthful strikers to their team, starting with Eric Pop, 19 years old, striker from Canada, but also has Romanian heritage. He last played for Karlsruher, I think that's how you say it. Any Germans can correct me there. SC's youth teams in the Bundesliga 2. He played in Canada before for League One Ontario for Pro Stars FC, where he contributed 13 goals in 18 appearances, and he's played for both Canadian and Romanian youth teams. So a young player coming in at striker. They do have Sean Hundle there still,
Mm.
as they're hoping he can kind of step up and be the number 9 that they were expecting him to be at the beginning of the last season. But if not, well, they have this player, Eric Pop, coming in as a young striker, and also Miles Morgan coming in, a player that I know quite well because he is another WFC2 product. A lot of WFC2 products have been coming in to the CPL as of late, and I'm loving it because I think a lot of these players are talented. So Miles Morgan, also 19, he played for WFC2 and MLS Next Pro. He's Toronto born. He's from TFC Academy. And he got his first pro contract with WFC2 just this past May after joining the club on trial. And immediately, for me, he looked exciting. He only made 6 appearances, including 2 starts. This was at amateur level. Sorry, this was at amateur level when he first joined. And I thought, okay, this is a player that can bring a little bit of something else to next pro. He was quick, he was dynamic, but he was hungry. He hunted down the ball. He was somebody that was hardworking and also still kind of like intelligent. Like it wasn't just running for running's sake. You could see that he was looking around, and trying to find the spaces to go in behind. And then after he signed his first pro deal, he played 22 games and scored 2 goals. Now, after the pro deal, a little bit of a plateau for him, but also the team in general are kind of going through an up and down season. But I still sort of saw those flashes from him. So I'm excited to see how he does now as, a top player, or at least having a top opportunity to play in a proper men's professional team with Valour. So now Valour have 2 young 19-year-old strikers that, Morgan also played for the youth national team, that have youth national team experience and have experience, in youth academies. What do you think of both of their signings?
Yeah, I mean, just hopefully it goes a bit better than Johansson's last year. I've not seen Miles Morgan at all, so I don't know in the end. Eric Pop not really either. So it's just going to be good to see a bit of like some fresh energy in there. And again, to reiterate, like Phil De Santos has chosen a style now, I think. So he's locating players for a style rather than bringing in players and seeing if they fit a style like they were last year with such a huge rotation of the squad. So he must see them as players that will work alongside Sean Hundle. Let's not forget Kean Williams is back. I think he could obviously did a lot on the wing last year, but with players coming, the type of players they brought in, you've got Faria, you've got Rizarasal, who could play out wide. You could see Kean Williams get a chance down the middle as well, and maybe change the shape of the way they attack. So they've got some options there, but I think these young players, you'd imagine, will be sort of encouraged in rather than thrown in. I think the way that Valour will do it, and if they can settle in this squad, then I think Valour in a much better position than they were last year for the likes of Johansson, I said, because it's what you're coming into now, or at least the idea of what you're coming into.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that for them, just getting any opportunity to get to that men's level and make that jump will be great for them. And as you say, getting eased into it will be nice. And hopefully will be better than Johansson or Abdul Binate as well. As these young strikers, hopefully they get a little bit more opportunity. And I know at least for Miles Morgan, he can be versatile. He can play in the wing as well. So if need be, if they need somebody to go into the spaces, he could be a player that can do that as well. But now, once again, looking at the transfers in, the transfers out, Mike, for you, what else do you think they need to be competitive and to finally get a playoff spot this season?
Yeah, it's another centre back, and like we said already, there's only 3. They need one or 2 more. They need someone who's going to be challenging for the starting spot, and maybe you find a young player who can play across a couple of positions at the back as well to give it just a cover. But I think that's the only areas they'll be looking at. They seem relatively set, I think, as a roster. There's not going to be much more movement.
Yeah, that's what it looks like to me. It looks like a pretty much established squad. I mean, we do know that Valour like to do their business early, so it's not surprising. But I think maybe if they could bring in an experienced center back to either force Romeo and Facineri to fight for the other place, I think that'll put them in a really good spot. But to finish, let's play higher or lower again, Mike. Can't go much lower than where they finished, though.
Higher or the same? What are you going, Felipe?
Higher
You
the
go first
same.
this time.
Yeah. I mean, they finished last. They had a 7-7-14 record. And they finished with a -11 goal difference. I'm so tempted to say stay the same, but I want to believe that they can do better. I just don't know. I mean, there's argument that they could do one better than a certain team that we'll talk about next week, just because of the lack of business from their end. But I'm not quite sold on everything. You know what? I'm gonna say higher, probably by one. I think there's a certain other V team that I think will finish last next season. So I'll say that they didn't do much better, but they'll maybe finish one place above.
Well, as Yaz said back in 1998, the only way is up, baby. It's got to be. They'll be flying. It's playoffs this year. It's done. It's already there. We're confident.
Are you trying to manifest it? Is that what you're doing? Or are you trying to bring it into existence?
You kind of see through me there, but okay.
Well, I applaud your relentless optimism with them, and I hope that they'll reward you on it, but I am not expecting them to. But that is it for this week. Ending on that note, thank you so much for listening to this podcast episode 3 of the preview series. Make sure to follow us once again on all of our socials at Coast to Coast FC, so you can give us your thoughts. Were we being too generous, too harsh, or on par for these two teams? We would love to hear from you. But until next week, where we finish off and round out the series, I'm Felipe Ojo.
And I'm Mike Rice.
And this has been Coast to Coast FC, signing out.